All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first live chat in our series about the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships Program, also known as STPF. My name is Marab Sarwar. I'm the recruitment director for the fellowship. You all have probably most likely heard from me plenty in my role, but I mainly serve as a resource for you to successfully navigate the application process and understand all things STPF, and also have the privilege of being your moderator in today's chat. This live chat series is really an opportunity for you to ask STPF fellows your questions. And so we hope that through these chats, you'll see how the fellowship can impact policy, and also still have a transformative experience. Okay, on to a few housekeeping items. If you haven't heard, we have moved our application open later this year to accommodate preparations for a new pilot program being introduced this application cycle. It's an initiative that will help broaden the scope of opportunities that are available and enhance policy fellowship experiences. A lot going on in a big moment of change. Really encourage you to please stay in touch and we're really excited to share more information about that pilot program as it becomes available. But for today's chat, we'll still kind of give an overview of the traditional fellowship model. And for those still learning about us, we'd love to share like a brief overview of STPF if you're unfamiliar. But historically, these fellowships are an opportunity for doctoral level scientists and engineers to spend a year contributing their expertise to federal policy. For 2025, applicants could still apply through our program areas, executive, legislative, and judicial. From those three program areas, you can apply to up to two of them. Fellowships are a paid 1-year full-time commitment in Washington, D.C. For a sense of timing, someone who applies in 2025 will be considered for a position in the fellowship class that runs from September 2026 to August of 2027. Also on eligibility, applicants must be US citizens and hold a doctoral degree in the sciences, social sciences, or engineering, and cannot be a full-time federal or AAAS employee. Those of you with a master's in engineering plus 3 years of professional engineering experience are also eligible to apply. All of you here represent many different backgrounds from all different types of disciplines and sciences. And so the diversity of discipline and background is really important to us and our partners and offices that host fellows that are looking for a wide range of backgrounds and skills. And then to put today's session into context, we're doing a live chat each month. So we have a live chat each month through November. You're more than okay to join us for one, some, or all of them. We try to incorporate a unique aspect of the fellowship experience in each chat, and you'll also get to hear from different STPF fellows. Today's chat is really focused on why still pursuing a career in science policy through our fellowships. But let's also get to the purpose of today's chat, which is to chat with fellows. So we expect to get a lot of questions about today and about the fellowship program. So please, we welcome those. We'll try to get to all of your questions. And you could also indicate if you'd like to ask a specific panelist or us at staff as a question, you're more than welcome to do that. Just type your question to the inbox and our team will try to get to as many questions as we can today. But without further ado, we'd love to start introducing our panelist. And so Joe Salvin is a first-year AAAS S&T Policy Fellow from the Office of Isotope R&D and Production in the Department of Energy. His work includes managing the communications and international relations for the office. Joe received his PhD in biological sciences from Duquesne University in 2019, where his dissertation was on the morphological development of the multicellular bacterium, Streptomyces psilocolor. I probably butchered that. I'm sorry, Joe. Afterward, he moved to Norwich, England to continue working in molecular microbiology, where he was a postdoctoral researcher at the John Innes Center. In the fellowship, Joe is a co-chair of the AAAS STPF National Security Affinity Group and helps run the social oversight group. Thank you, Joe. Adriana Bankston is an advocate for scientific research and innovation at the federal level. As the first ever AAAS ASGCT Congressional Policy Fellow, Adriana currently works to support sustained federal research funding in the U.S. House of Representatives. In recognition of her work to support the U.S. scientific enterprise, Adriana was awarded the inaugural ARIS Emerging Broader Impacts Leader Award, the Sigma Z Mantle Next Generation Women's Leadership Award, and the Top 20 in 2022 Award for Excellence in Advocacy from the Advocacy Association. Adriana earned her PhD in biochemistry, cell and developmental biology from Emory University. Thank you both for being here today. And so before we go into questions from the audience, going to acknowledge that this is a very different time and there's a lot going on. And STPF is also in a different moment than we were in years past. And so a lot of hesitation or when I'm on the road talking to potential applicants, a lot of uneasiness, a lot of hesitation about a career in science policy and what that means now. And so well, let's kind of kick us off with a question. If you can introduce yourself, but if you could also answer, what advice would you give to current applicants or scientists who are interested in working in policy, and why should those scientists consider applying for STPF? Adriana, would you kick us off?
Sure. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. It's nice to see a large crowd here today. I definitely participated in these chats on the other side before. So nice to be here and provide some advice. So I'm, as per the introduction, I'm currently working in the House for Representative Bill Foster, who's the only physicist. Obviously not speaking on behalf of the office here, but that is something to say that working for a scientist is also a very interesting moment right now. I've come to really appreciate, the value of government experience in DC. It's really, everything here revolves around the government in some way. I think you're either in it or you're working with it in some way from the outside. It's really been extremely eye-opening. So I would definitely encourage you to look at opportunities where you can engage and apply for the fellowship, obviously. I think for the background that folks bring here, I would also say it's really useful to use their background in public service. That's something I don't think I fully appreciated the role that scientists play, especially at this moment, right? So we're talking about meeting the moment here. It's really important that we have good policy, evidence-based, but also really educating, congressional staff and members on what it means to be a scientist here. And again, working for a scientist is a plus. That was one of the reasons I chose the office, because he understands sort of the importance of science, and I'm sort of already coming into this with a good platform. But we have been working a lot to try to educate Congress and especially Republicans as well on the importance of science. So happy to delve more into that. Maybe I'll stop here for now.
Marab, can you remind me what the exact question was before I go off on a tangent?
Honestly, premise is really, what advice would you give to scientists working in policy? Why STPF for that?
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, so as Marab said, my name's Joe. I'm in the Office of Isotope R&D and Production. I am, like Adriana, I'm here on my own, so this is not reflective of any views of any office or the federal government. But I think, as Marab said, it's a weird time, and that's okay. The thing that's great, and that I hope to get the point across, is that there's still no place better to do mission work than the federal government. The federal government has a great capacity to do mission-driven work, and if you are interested in doing mission-driven work, just as a brief example, for my office. My office helps. You might not think of the DOE as a healthcare oriented office, because it's mostly not. But my office in the DOE helps provide medically relevant radionuclides for cancer therapy. And so if you still want to do work that has impacts on people's lives, this is still a great time to be involved in science policy. If you join the executive branch, so Adriana's in Congress, which is different than the executive branch. The executive branch has a much tighter, top-down, there's less wiggle room in terms of how you can execute policy, right? So if you have specific policy goals that are not up on the administration's agenda, that might not be something that you can do as well. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't still be involved in the process. And the fellowship is a great opportunity for that because it lets you sort of get a sneak peek at different places. And it's actually a really great time. And maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more. But as Merab noted, I grew up in molecular biology, microbiology, and now I work in an office that makes isotopes. So this is a great opportunity to do something a little bit different in life. And so this is an opportunity for that. It's an opportunity to get involved, and it's an opportunity to make yourself, help make a difference. And I'll stop there for now.
Yeah, I think I think you were kind of hitting a Joe on like how your background leads to different opportunities, right? And so something I always try to tell the applicant pool is to always be flexible in the sense that you aren't going to get your first, like you might have an idea of where you want to be placed, you might have an idea of what type of impact you want to make. And that's not really how this works, right? I think it's kind of a matching process where you're almost kind of doing exchange of like, here's the skill set that you offer, and here's something that might challenge you or push you to think in a different direction. And so what I do think is really cool about the fellowship is that our applicants can still use like their scientific background, right? And so no matter what discipline you were following. So I was wondering if you can maybe lean into what role your background really played, or your role in science really played in kind of like how you were placed, and then what contributions you ended up making.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think when you think about your skill set, I remember when I started, one of my favorite things is when I think about when I started college and I walked into organic chemistry, and the guy started the lecture by saying, he's like, I don't really like the name of this course. He said, this course is called Organic Chemistry 101 or something like that. And he was like, I'd prefer it to be called Critical Problem Solvings with Organic Chemistry, because what he was trying to teach us was about taking information and critically thinking about it and trying to come up with a solution. And when you think about it, that's basically what you spend all your days doing as a PhD. When you're doing your PhD research, you're taking some problems and you're looking at all the available information and you're trying to synthesize that into the best solution and path forward. And that's what you do. And that's what we do here. And it's just like, it looks different than when you're at the bench, or when you're in, a sort of like, a theoretical computing space or something like that. It's like, it looks a little bit different when you're in the office or you're in Congress, right? It's like you have a different set of inputs and you have a different set of outputs, but the problems kind of remain the same. How do you tackle this issue? And one of the things that I always like to harp on, and has been a thing in science, and I think forever, is people always forget that there's different parts of the scientific method, right? And communication is one of the parts. It's the very last part, actually, in the scientific method. And it's the one people take for most granted, because they think a lot of the time, once I do my research and I write a journal article, that counts. And it's like, but part of it is actually communicating why people should care about what you do. And so one of the things that I do on a daily basis now is I think about ways to actually tell people and get people to care why we do the things we do in the federal government. Why should people care that we funded isotope research, for actinium-225 that nobody knows about, nobody cares about until they do, right? Nobody cares about these things until you make them do it. And so that's one of the things I do in the office. I do a bunch of random things all day, but like, it's like, that's one of the things where I take, I think about my PhD and I think about in my postdoc, and I think about communicating that information and communicating how I did this problem solving and how we did this solution finding and putting that out into the world. And this is like that, but it's different, right? And that's just setting aside all the other random problems that I help solve on a daily basis. And you can talk more about like program management and things like that. But, when you think about that, I want you to think about your skill set a little bit more abstractly and less sort of like about molecular biology, about nuclear physics, or about neuroscience, whatever have you. But yeah, I think that's a good place for it.
Yeah, so for my background, so I have a PhD in biological sciences. I did pretty much work on muscular dystrophy in my PhD. That may or may not have played a role in my selection for the fellowship. Hard to know. That's a question that people ask a lot of times, whether the society that selected you, whether that relates to your background or not. Hard to know. Anyway, I think I really, have a background in also working with Congress before this. Happy to go more into that. But I really was kind of going for this specific opportunity to help understand how members of Congress support science. Those sorts of things, kind of to piggyback on what Joe said, is we really work on really large questions around national issues around science. How do we keep America competitive? The members, of course, being in the House and Senate is different, but obviously we deal with constituents in our district, local issues, national issues around science that we all are aware of. And so I think understanding also the scope of what the member works on, what sorts of things do you prioritize on a daily basis, right? And these are things that you all know how to do because PhDs know how to do project management and prioritize ideas and figure out what's due tomorrow versus 2 weeks from now, that sort of thing. I think that's really the biggest thing I learned from here is seeing how members of Congress prioritize different issues, how they balance everything going on, and be able to bring that expertise here. And happy to talk more about day-to-day kind of contributions if we get to that. Maybe we'll stop for now.
Yeah, I mean, there's also I'm monitoring the Q&A. There's a bunch of questions about kind of like the current environment that you're in and how that has maybe impacted you. I think this can be, a twofold question is really how, of course, there's a change moment happening. But I was wondering if you can maybe speak to that part, but also maybe what are some of the opportunities that are also coming out of this? And so for folks who might be feeling that little hesitation or that little edge, what are, you've kind of like have talked about it a little ad hoc, but some of the things that you've seen that you still think like folks are still making an impact with, or that you might see an opportunity for an applicant who ends up being a STPF fellow?
Yeah,
No.
Joe, do you want to start?
I'm happy to. So we'll have different, I assume, perspectives on this because we're living in different worlds. But so yeah, it's weird. We've already mentioned it a couple times. No point in beating around the bush. I mean, there is a big change that occurred when transitions occurred. Arguably, depending on who you talk to, it's the biggest change that many people in the federal government have ever seen. It's like, so anecdotally, that's what people tell me, people who've worked in the federal government for 30 years. It's a tough time, and it's something that is tough because we are still living through it in the sense that there are more changes to come. Many of these offices and agencies are still gonna go through rifts, and which is a word many of you maybe never heard of before this administration. So the reductions in force, and so I had not really experienced it before this, and there's all kinds of changes that's going to keep coming probably steadily, for a little bit of time, and we're all just adjusting to it, and that's the thing, right? Like, there's no point in beating around the bush. It's like people have come and gone because of the changes in the administration, right? Like this is the way of it. It's like, and we've helped people through the process. And I think that's actually one of the great benefits of the fellowship is it gives you a built-in group of people that, are innately interested in caring about each other. And that this is one great thing in that time. But I mean, in terms of the bigger picture, it's like when you're thinking about what you want to do and how we want to work, it's like there's still plenty of things to do. It's like just because, the administration outlines these are my big priorities doesn't mean that Adriana in Congress is going to say, well, we're not going to fund all those other things. It's like that's not how it works. It's like we are still going to get money to do isotope production, even if they don't care about us at all. Well, we might get less. I hope we don't get less. Wink. But this is one of those things that you're going to still get to execute your office's goals. Like if your office is putting, if you're interested in this fellowship program and your office puts out a spot to do work, it's like especially in this climate, they are going to want you to do something. They're putting it out there for you to do something. And it's just a matter of you linking up for these things and finding the opportunities in this program. And that's what it's going to look like, right? And so I want you to understand that, yes, it is weird, but also people are still doing work and things are getting done and people are getting help. Maybe it's a different number and type and amount of people. Who knows? That's not for me to say, but things are still happening. And I'll stop rambling because I think Adriana's doing a better job of keeping her answers succinct, and I'm just over here.
Well, I guess I'll agree to that point. We do still have to do our. Oh, sorry. No. No. The point that we do still have to do our regular job. This is all additional, which is actually very interesting. I will say, I joined in election year. My boss got reelected, saw all of that, started the new Congress. So it's really been very interesting to see kind of ins and outs of what's going on in Congress when this all starts. I think that, as far as learning day to day, again, my boss, being a scientist, is one of the few people that has been tapped into all the things that are going on. So our work has been exponentially growing to where I eventually, took over a lot of the science and research policy issues, and obviously having that background, but also my office was nice enough to let me lead on a lot of that. So I'll have a lot to show from this. So I think that's one plus, is that, there's been a lot of activity around this. We've done a number of things, which includes legislation and letters to the Trump administration to try to hold them accountable and say, we are not happy with the cuts that are happening at the NSF, the firings going on. My boss also often leads it on Department of Energy funding and all of those sorts of things. So those are somewhat usual. Some of the things have been ramped up there. There's also things related to kind of what's going on in the world now. So, right, for example, we co-sponsored a resolution for National Science Foundation 75th anniversary, which was in May. So again, these things are going on. We're plugged into that. It's not related necessarily to what's happening, but those things come together, right? To where we want to celebrate the NSF, but also acknowledging where we are right now. So that's a good example of doing what we would normally do with kind of a twist of the flavor of what's happening. Other than that, I think, it's been, I've seen a lot more, activism and the folks speaking out and coming out and defending science in a number of ways, whether they're fellows or other ways in personal capacity. Being here, I've heard from a lot of students and trainees who are at universities or labs within our district who have been impacted, and it's nice to be on this side and try to hear them out and have some influence in trying to help from the government side. So happy to expand more on that. I think Congress can do a lot, and we've done a lot, but we can do more. Happy to expand more on that.
Yeah, I think one of the questions we have in here too, and something about the fellowship, I want to say is that they're, yes, it's just this moment of it could be a career transition. This could be your start into science policy, but there are also many folks who kind of use this as an experience, right? And who come for a year and then take those learnings into other careers, take that back to their home institutions, and then kind of like leverage that they were a fellow, but also that they have this set of like policy experience. And so, again, like we're still here and making sure that folks apply to us and have that experience. And then, we're pretty agnostic about what folks do afterwards, whether that's working in policy or taking it back. And so, but really like that, our core mission is to ensure that scientists have this experience and that scientists can get heard in the federal space, and time will go on, things will change, but ensuring that we still have that presence is, I think, from the staff side, that I can help communicate, and why we're still recruiting, why we're still marketing the fellowship despite the changes that we're working through. A really great question in our Q&A was someone who had asked if there was particular recommendations you can give to either prepare for a career in science policy, or to kind of either make sure that someone's, or what experiences you can take out of the fellowship to the next stage of your career. So I think it's two-part. One, like, how does somebody really best prepare for a career here? And then twofold, how does the fellowship lead to the next stage of your career?
Yeah, I think I can take this on because I give a lot of advice to students about how to get started. When I left the lab, my transition sort of has been through, sort of a think tank, nonprofit, doing research on research. Then I transitioned into a couple of roles in VC. What I will say is that, trying to work with organizations that or work on policy topics that you're interested in, work on research projects, try to come to the Hill when you can. Try to write something or speak about issues you're interested in. So, I sort of started talking about what I wanted to see changing in higher education. Coming from academia, a lot of my career kind of spanned from that, and like thinking through how universities can better support the next generation and students who are in the sciences. And so that really has helped, having a thread of sort of policy interests that I've taken into multiple positions. That's really, I think, what I normally tell people is, find something you want to work on, see who's doing those things, and see if you can get involved and volunteer. Write things and speak out and kind of make people know who you are and what you care about, and that helps a lot when you're starting out. And build some of this portfolio when it comes to, if you can write blogs or speak on podcasts or those sorts of things, can help to start building your brand a little bit, even as a student. I think for post fellowship, I think personally my application for this fellowship was very honest. I had, like I said, I'd worked with Congress before and really wanted to be here and understand ins and outs as somebody who has come to the Hill before but never been here. Tell the story of why you want to do this, how it fits into your goal. I know everyone says that, but it's really true that I think that if you make it more personal, to where this is where I'm coming from and where I want to go, show some examples of really what your passions are and how that fits in, I think it can help you be competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to belabor it because I think I agree with basically everything Adriana said. So I think the one thing I was thinking about is when we talk about getting involved, one of the things you can do that will help you a lot when you start getting involved is learning how to communicate to different groups of people. Particularly if you're interested in, like Adriana, talking to Congress people, or you're talking to even senior executives in the government. It's like, I've already heard this multiple times since I've been here. I thought I was like, okay, I got my bullet points trimmed down. They're like 2 sentences, and that was too long. And I had to tighten this up to like a literal sentence, a nutshell of what happened. Because when I send that up the chain, I'm literally going to do this right after this call. I'm putting in some bullets for our office that goes up for review at our sort of departmental unit. And then that goes up to the secretary. And the secretary is going to get a big packet that's like probably 10, 20 pages long for this week, just on what all the offices in the department are doing. Do you think he's even going to read that? No, probably not. Someone in his office will, hopefully. But it's like that's the thing you have to think about. It's a different space. When you're talking about academia, there's all this nuance and all this, like we have to qualify. We didn't cure cancer. We just, found a protein that might help us, maybe someday help us treat cancer. And only this specific type. It's like, it's not like that here. It's like, if you want to get involved in policy, you have to go start thinking higher level and telling people immediately why they should care. And maybe they'll stick with you through the rest of the way. And so that's so if you're interested in doing this, like Adriana said, get involved, and you can immediately start thinking about that. How do I sell this topic that I care about in the quickest, most eye-catching, most hook way that doesn't get bogged down in the details. How do you do it? And it's tough. There is no one size fits all answer, and there's no one size fits all answer for every topic. And for afterward, it's an evolving time. We're going to see over the next few months what the opportunities are like in the federal government. If the hiring freeze ever ends, maybe it won't. Who knows? No, I'm kidding. It will have to end eventually because people have to do the work. I think. I'm pretty sure. I think we'll get there. But yeah, that I think that there's a lot of mystery right now about what's going to happen. There's always nonprofits and universities. Obviously, they're in different states nowadays. But, it's like the federal government will continue and will always need scientists and input, and hopefully more of you can.
Definitely. I also like to tell folks too that, you know, obviously I work for STPF, love, want us to do well. There are other ways to get involved in a policy level, right? It's not just through this fellowship. Always encourage folks to look at if there's a state fellowship for them to, if there's policy that they can do in their homes, like in their backyard, right? There are always so many ways to get involved. Something that I also think about as I was listening to you, Joe, was your interest in policy and like how folks lean into that. And I'll recruit, right? I'll sit at the table. Some people come by, they'll see a fellowship and go like, oh man, I really hate my lab, or I really am just like sick of academia, which is fine, right? You're allowed to feel that way, but that shouldn't be your primary reason for coming and applying to us. But a question from the audience is if you can maybe speak to the learning curve of transitioning from an academic environment to the government. And either what was either difficult to adjust to, or maybe something that was super rewarding that you got in the space that you're in now.
Okay. So I'm going to cheat at the back end because I saw another question in the chat that I liked. So I'm going to include that because you said something about rewarding. So learning curve. It depends. So as always, like with everything, it depends. Biggest learning curve is you are going to interact with more people than you normally do. That is something that people don't always appreciate. And so, I came from a bench science background, right? So most of the time, I'm pretty much doing my own experiments. It's like I am, talking to my boss one-on-one once a week. We have lab meeting once a week. It's like, but really, most of the time I'm doing my own work. But when you start to get into policy, you're going to be talking to people within your own office on projects. You're going to be talking to people in other offices, different agencies, perhaps stakeholders in the community. Depends on the office, what your work looks like. And for a lot of people, that's a bit of a shock. It's like that a lot of your day is going to be talking to people. Now, it's not always like that. It's like it's not every day. It's like, and maybe in Congress, it's actually Adriana maybe can talk a little bit more about this. That they do a lot of talking to constituents and other types of stakeholders, and so there's a little bit of that. But it's not uncommon for me to have a day in the week where I have a 4 to 6 hour block of meetings back to back. It's like with various different people. It's not uncommon. In fact, it's pretty normative. And then I'll still have a day or two where I don't really have any meetings, or I have like one, and then I try and talk to people in the office. And so that's actually a big thing, is talking to people. It's also the thing that I mentioned in my last little bit, which is cutting out all the garbage, all the excess talking, keeping it tight and keeping the information on point. Very different than academia. People struggle with that at the beginning, but honestly, you can figure it out, and most people get up to speed at a basic level pretty quickly. That's actually not that hard. It's a bit of a sticker shock kind of thing in the beginning where you're like, but they need to know. And then it turns out they don't. It's like, and then you were like, okay, it's fine. And you get over it. Otherwise, it depends on what you're doing. So there's a lot of program management, which is different for people. So like, you're used to managing your own project, but generally when you go to the government, you might have your own program, but it's going to depend on other people in a very significant way. And that's a different kind of interaction than a lot of you might be used to. And that's not to deter you from doing it. It's just to say that can be different, right? You need to depend on other people for information, and not just in program management, maybe just in general, right? You know, it's like I have to send weekly bullets up to the secretary every week. Well, I don't do all the work in the office, so people have to tell me what they did that was important. So I have to hear about that. So either I knock on their doors or send them a bunch of emails, or I call them and I have to find out, right? And so it's like that's a little bit different than doing your own experiments at the bench, right? And so all these little bits and bobs things, and then I'll say the rewarding thing, because this is 2 questions, so that's why I'm taking so long. The rewarding thing, somebody put in the chat something we're specifically working on that was rewarding. And, you know, I tell you what, doing research is great. I love it. It was great. I love doing basic science and discovery research. But one of the most rewarding things that I did is I helped get a grant pushed through recently that goes to support our university partners who produce isotopes, radioactive isotopes for kids in cancer clinical trials. And without this grant, the university would not have been able to proceed. They wouldn't have been able to make isotopes. People would have lost their jobs. And the kids wouldn't have got their isotopes to help with their cancer treatment. And that's the kind of stuff you can do in the federal government. And that's very rewarding.
Well, that was a great answer. I don't know if I can top that one, but so I will say Congress moves very fast, which is something I don't think I was fully ready for. As I said, had worked with Congress as an advocate, have come to the Hill before. I thought I knew really what this was and really had no idea. So, you know, again, encourage you to apply to congressional because it is extremely transformative. Just being here every day, something different happens. To some of the things that Joe said is somewhat similar in the sense of definitely it's very interactive. You're working with a lot of different people collaborating. Most of the projects are team-based. You have to be able to work with other people who come from different backgrounds. Also being proactive, right? So I think also to what Joe was saying that a lot of this, the reason things happen is because I say, oh, I'm interested in this. Can I take this project? Go to my boss and say, you know, oh, you know, can I help with this, you know, small thing and something like that. So it does take somebody that has you know, this sort of personality where you're not afraid to go after what you want and say, can I do this project? Can I help with this? And kind of, you know, they've done a good job again with helping, I think, blend in my own interests with the office and what they are working on. So that's another advice, you know, find an office that will kind of support your own interests as well within what they're doing. We do a lot of constituent meetings. As I said, it's been really interesting to hear from, you know, university students and trainees and folks who are experiencing all this funding cuts right now and try to help. What's been really, I think, rewarding about this too is just partly problem solving, I will say, you know, as we talked about a lot about trying to solve big problems and try to see who's involved in those things and how do we create something useful. Being able to contribute to something that's relevant, right? So I mentioned the NSF resolution, you know, this is something that's going on right now. NSF 75th anniversary was in May. You know, we wrote this bill and not alone again, but we contributed to that. And, you know, that happened because they're kind of in the moment of, you know, this is what's happening. I'm contributing in real time to this bill, which is bipartisan and nice to see that. And of course, happy to celebrate science and what NSF has been doing. The other thing is also, you know, being able to contribute to the appropriations process. I mean, that could be a whole other discussion, but, you know, we don't do that work, but we can send requests to the appropriations committee to support science projects from our district. Some of them have come from, you know, University of Chicago, sort of universities that are within the district. A couple have been from student groups, which is, again, is very motivating for me to be able to push that forward and say, you know, these students came to us and they said, these are the issues that we have. Can we include this program into appropriations requests, right? And so that is a good example of an impact. If you hear somebody's problem and try to include it into something that may go somewhere, right? Whether it's like a funding request, a letter, or a speech. You know, my boss has done a lot of speeches to defend science, a lot of which I wrote myself. A lot of our letters to the administration included, again, words about, future of science, how are we going to help the workforce? And those may or may not have a large impact, but it shows congressional support for science and for the pipeline, right? And the students who are coming to us, and we're doing something about that. So that's really exciting.
Awesome. I've gotten a few questions about just, age and experience for those thinking about applying for the fellowship. And so, I actually think one of the biggest misconceptions is that someone has to be a policy expert before applying for the fellowship. Definitely not true, right? The whole purpose of the program is to, have that policy experience for you so that, come in with the space and learn. I think demonstrating your interest is always great, and kind of like understanding the impacts is always nice to see. But, we definitely do not expect anyone to be like a policy aficionado before coming in. Again, the purpose of our program is to give that to you. And then around age, you can apply at any career stage too. So we have faculty who do this on their sabbatical. We have retirees who do this fellowship. And I think, part of like what's cool about the fellowship is like you're all coming to DC and you're surrounded by so many different folks in different career stages who all then like lean on each other, but meet each other and have different experiences, right? So, from the outside working, as a staff member, what's really neat is like you'll see everybody meet at orientation, be friends, and then kind of engage with each other throughout the city, but then also learn from each other too. So, would not think those are things to exclude you, but actually those are the things that kind of like help you in the application process and things that you can lean on, right? You should part of the application process is really introducing yourself as like a 360-degree person, right? Obviously be good at your science, but then those are the things too. So I think questions for you, Adriana or Joe, is really just kind of like maybe if you can maybe speak to the environment of working with different fellows throughout the cohort, and kind of like what you've maybe leaned on working with that group, or just maybe getting to engage with folks with different backgrounds, but still kind of doing this fellowship together.
Adriana, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I think congressional cohort is smaller compared to the executive, which is interesting. I think I don't know the exact numbers, but I would say probably roughly we ended up about half of us in the House and half in the Senate, maybe more in the Senate, as traditionally happens. But I do, try to meet up with folks on the House side quite often. We try to do lunches. It's been nice to have a group to meet up with, especially when things are really rough, and just, meet up and chat about what we all were thinking. And of course, like now that we're coming close to the end, to talk to each other about what we want to do after. But I think, coming back to the theme of this session, I guess, of meeting the moment, it's been really nice to have that cohort to fall back on and people to talk to and grab a coffee with, and, just talk about what you're going through, whether successes that you have or, challenges in Congress and what we're dealing with. So it's been really great to have that network this year.
So, I think as Merav said, people come from all over the place, and all over their timelines. In the executive branch, we have people who are professors, who are just fresh out of grad school, postdocs, like myself. It really does span the gambit. And, so honestly, if you're interested, it's a great opportunity no matter what stage you are. And it's a really interesting thing. That you get people from different stages, because people bring a lot of different perspectives in that case. Typically a lot of the people who are professors and stuff have like a really well-defined sort of scientific background as well, and so they're really interested in their area, and they want to take it back, the information that they learn about how the government works and how to interact with the government. And so it's really interesting getting in a lot of different feedbacks. I mean, as Adriana said, we have a big cohort in the executive branch, but as we're allowed to interact with each other, us and the executives and the Congress. So, we still, I'm the social guy, so I have to say this as well. It's like we do happy hours every week. Everyone's invited. And so we always have a good time. And so it's a really interesting environment to have all these different folks, and it just gives you a different flavor for different things. And so you have a lot of people who become unlikely friends, and that they wouldn't have in academia necessarily, because you have professors who are hanging out with freshly graduated graduate students, right? Like you don't really see that in academia, right? But here you get to do that, and that gives you a bit of experience. And it helps you take away and sort of impart the lessons you're learning in different ways, which sounds very soapy, but like it's true. And I'm really happy with all the different people that I've gotten to meet so far on this process. And so yeah, so I think that's
A really great question I'm seeing in the Q&A is if there's a certain personality type that succeeds in the fellowship or fits well in the fellowship. And so I think it's easy to put yourself in a box and go like, oh, extroverted people are going to do well in this, et cetera, et cetera. But I actually don't think of it like that. I think it's more skill based, right? I think being able to, engage things and like, be empathetic and work across difference, and those are all skills. I wonder if maybe either of you kind of have like a take or an idea about like this idea of what your personality type should be, rather, or like the skills
yeah.
maybe that you gain in the fellowship instead.
I have a thought on this, because I think labels are great until they're not, and I think that that's basically what you were saying. Labels help you identify people who are in your in group, and in your out group, and so that can be helpful. That can be stimulating and building for your community aspects. But when you come to the government and you say, "Oh, I'm an introvert and I don't like meetings," and it's like it's actually not that bad. You will like in the sense like you can minimize the number of meetings you have, and you can try to focus your energy in different ways. Because I've met plenty of people who are card carrying introverts that are doing this job right now, and they are succeeding, they're thriving, they're doing well. Obviously, I'm a bombastic sort of extroverted personality. It's like, and I succeed in certain places because that's where I like to be. And the thing is like all of these opportunities that you'll have, you're going to know ahead of time what more or less they want you to do. So if you don't want to if you don't want to go to Congress, right, for instance, and talk to constituents every day, then don't do that. It's like that's okay. You don't have to do that. There are other things you could do. There's all kinds of jobs in the government that you can do, that you can help people in various different ways that are more suited to your area of interest and your area of comfort. And I don't know if we were going to get to this, but it kind of ties into the work-life balance of it all. It's like the work life of it all is much better in the federal government. I can't speak to Congress, but certainly much better than academia. And so I know some of you are worried about that and what that's like. I'm not going to say I don't ever do anything off hours and stuff, but this is much closer to your 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 with an hour lunch job than academia is. It's much chiller most of the time. Yes, of course, there are always crazy things happening. So sometimes here or there, you do have to, respond to a couple of emails and stuff. But for the most part, my boss, he's always like, why are you answering emails when you're on vacation? It's like, because you shouldn't be. And my supervisors in graduate school and postdoc would have never said that. They wouldn't have even crossed their mind. And so the thing is this is an opportunity for you to flourish and to do something different. And it's just I encourage you to think less about like being an introvert and extrovert and more about what you want to do, and being open and honest about that in your application and in the process if you go forward.
I think one thing I'd add to that is like, I don't negotiate against yourself either, right? And putting yourself in this box of saying, oh, I don't want to do this, so I'm not going to engage with that, I think is, especially now, like not a good way to kind of like make yourself available for the fellowship or for your career, right? I think having an openness and adaptability, um, you know, being uncomfortable sometimes, right? I think that's part of the gig, and if you're open to being challenged, I think that's what makes you a good fit for the fellowship. And so, yes, it's like those are like the trade-offs, right? It's just like you might have to work across difference, you might have to engage with people who think differently than you might. So, but at the same time, these are the benefits, and everything you said, Joe. Sorry, Adriana.
Yeah, no, I think I'm glad Joe went first because I was still thinking about this. So I think it does help to be analytical and be able to do good research. And as we talked about, publish good policy and try to find the resources that have that. So I think, your research background does help really to develop a good bill, for example, something that, makes sense and hasn't been done before, and you can create something original and all of that you can do. Would encourage you to think broader beyond your discipline, right? So we talked about, where I come from, but here we really work on science very broadly. And again, large questions are on that, right? So think big, think how do we help science in this country, right? Beyond your discipline. But also I think every fellowship experience is different, right? And to what you just said, it can be very unpredictable where you end up from where you thought you were going to be when you interview. Can talk more about that too, but be open-minded and trying to see what opportunities exist at the time you're here. I think for me, so I guess going back to this question of introvert and extrovert, I'm I guess would label myself either way or the other, but when I maybe more of an introvert normally, but I think that if I'm working on something that I'm interested in, I don't have a problem going to people and saying like, can I work on this? I want to, support certain projects. There are certain things I'm more passionate about, and I'll go and work on those issues. So I think, again, what we talked about before, having that personality of somebody who has initiative and is proactive and isn't scared to take on new things. Because I think even Congress, even more so, because I think it's very entrepreneurial in a lot of ways. You're always coming up with new things, right? So new bill ideas, drafting letters that didn't exist to meet the moment now, right? How do we help science now? Those things may or may not exist, but you're creating it from scratch, right? And then that thing exists in the world. So that's one of the things I really enjoyed about this experience, is really just creating something that never existed and now it's a bill, right? Those sorts of things. So I think that personality does help to be able to come up with ideas and then create new things and having that sort of mindset.
Okay, we're coming up on the last 10 minutes. My last question for the panel, and then I'll do some housekeeping at the end, is if you maybe want to talk about what your next steps might be after the fellowship, and how the fellowship influenced your perspectives on the next thing you want to do. I know you both of you are in different stage. Adriana, you're leaving. Joe, I think you're doing another year, but just wanted to kind of like maybe if you can maybe speak to what do you think you'll do next, or how has this really impacted the next stage?
Do you want to go, Adriana?
Go ahead.
So, yeah, I don't know yet. The answer is I don't know. As Marab said, I'm sticking on for a second year, which you can do if your office is willing and you're all in good standing in the executive branch. Congress is a little bit different, and so as far as I'm aware, Marab looked a little skittish there. I think that's true, and the yeah, and so I got a second year, and when I'll tell you, when I came into this, I was not looking to go back to academia. I'm still not, and I was looking to spend more time in place and policy and in this world. And I came from a postdoc before this, and I have no interest in going back to that life. But at the same time, the opportunities are different now. The world is a different place. And I am very, very fortunate that I have a second year. And so I will be kicking the can down the road a little bit before I make any big decisions. But, the fellowship has impacted that. It's there are opportunities that I'm aware of and that I can partake in, and connections now that I have that I just did not even have an ounce of before this opportunity. And so I'm really not worried about it. Maybe I should be. But I'm really interested in actually where the world is going to take me. It's like, and I think it's one of those moments, I think that, is exciting, actually, because I don't know where I'm going to be in a year. And I think that that's exciting. Some people might find that a little nervous, but I'm excited by that. And I'm interested. And I don't know, Marab, are we going to get is this our close? Is this it? So, okay. Yeah, and so if you are interested, I am happy to chat with you. Feel free to ping me an email. I don't know if our personal emails are available to them, but I can drop it in the chat. Well, I don't know if there is a chat, but Marab can tell me how to do that. And then if you need any questions or help with the application, I did the thing with Marab last year for the champions. I don't know what it was called, but I helped a few people last year as well. Happy to help. And I think when we talked about meeting the moment, right? I thought about this quote from a fellow Pittsburgher, Mr. Rogers, and he was talking about how his mom would always say when there was a crisis or an event, she was always like, look for the helpers. There'll always be helpers out there. But the thing, as you realize, is you're an adult, is that that's advice for a child and not for an adult. And to meet the moment, it's your opportunity to be the helpers, right? To help us get over the line and be, and keep science policy relevant, keep the federal government and government as a whole relevant and working. And it's now an opportunity for you to do that. And I'm happy that I did it. And I wouldn't change anything despite all of the sort of changes and chaos that has happened. And I'm happy to be here. And so happy to talk about it further. Kick it over to you.
Yeah, so I'm also still deciding. I will say, I think my career sort of has been around kind of advocating for science and research and the STEM pipeline and the workforce, people who want to stay in research and all of that. So that'll carry on to whatever I do next. Being in government, has been really unique. I think it's definitely added something to what I have done before, which has been really the most impactful experience I've ever had up to now. And I think, we'll sort of see where things go. I think it's in some ways a tough time because there's so many transitions, but also opportunities for where job openings may exist that this moment is creating. As far as how can we help science, it may lead to new positions that didn't exist. Organizations are starting up that didn't exist before this. So look for those things if you're looking for positions kind of when you're leaving, and folks who are leaving now. I think that so I guess I want to leave you with this idea of this crisis or chaos or whatever we want to call it does have a lot of opportunities for things that you didn't expect that could come out of this. And similarly, happy to help as well. Happy to share my LinkedIn. My email is also on there. So if anyone would like to chat further, I'm happy to do that as well.
Great. Thank you both. Really, really appreciate you all making the time. So some last minute housekeeping items for folks still here. The application does open later this year. Please just stay in touch. The one thing I'll add is, again, this is a change moment for us, and ask applicants who have known us and who have known our program to really give us grace as well. I think as we're figuring out how to kind of still expand opportunities and make sure that this program exists and succeeds, we'll be communicating when the next step is open, and to give us that grace too. I know there was also a lot of unanswered questions in the box. This is actually one of the most attended live chats that we've had. If we didn't get to your question, please reach out to the fellowships inbox. The other thing I'll also add is we have 2 very long FAQ pages. So if you have a very personal question, those FAQ pages are also a resource for you to kind of see if that question has been asked, or if there's a response for you there. If you're not seeing it on that side, please still reach out. But a lot of resources for folks who are still interested in learning about us and getting that program. We'll have another chat. I hope that we'll have some more information about the application by then too in July. And then you can also follow us at AAAS STPF on most socials. So with that said, thank you again to our panelists. You're also more than welcome to reach out to them individually. I think LinkedIn is usually the best thing to do. I will say, I think people who can self-advocate for themselves do well in this process, right? So don't feel shy reaching out to a fellow. If you see somebody that you really connect with, usually most folks are very open. If they don't respond, if they don't, that's not anything against you, just reach out to someone else as well. So would never take anything personally if somebody doesn't respond. But again, really, I think people who succeed are the folks who kind of like take on that like that advocate for themselves to be involved in the process. So that's my last piece of advice. I'll see you all next month if you want to come back for a live chat. Thank you again for attending. Really appreciate you making the time. But yeah, thank you all. Have a good day.